Welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Bargman. A few years ago, I wrote and performed a solo show called The Edge of Every Day, which was an exploration of the rough edges and contradictions we all face and grapple with. The show hit a nerve, and the relevance of the topic would only grow over time more than I could have foreseen. So, here we are. Real talk with real people, sharing stories and perspectives that spark provocative invitations to leap out of what's safe, on the edge of every day. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on the edge of every day here on TalkRadio.NYC. Tonight, we are live in the Hive with diversity and inclusion expert Annemarie Shrouder, author of the best-selling book, Being Brown in a Black and White World, Conversations for Leaders About Race, Racism, and Belonging, for our 53rd episode entitled The Edge Between Black and White. As Annemarie so expertly and courageously explores in all the stories she shares in her informative and powerful book, how can we move from the structures of either or, choosing sides, staying polarized, to the inclusive mindset of both and that embraces complexities found within each of us and in our world at large? For those of you who have become loyal listeners here on The Edge of Every Day, thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with me and my guests. Our numbers keep growing, and I have you to thank. I couldn't do it without you. Please continue to share this podcast with friends and family, and take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Sandra Bargman on The Edge of Every Day. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to The Edge. If you like what you hear tonight and you want to check out my past episodes with my inspiring guests, you can find them on TalkRadio.NYC, on your favorite podcast platforms, and on my YouTube channel. And again, that's Sandra Bargman on The Edge of Every Day. This show is about pushing boundaries and exploring rough edges. Through conversations and shared stories with friends and colleagues, it's my hope that we can begin to understand our edges. And what I mean by edges is those places where we are fearful, those places where we are resistant to change, those places where paradoxes and contradictions live in our beliefs and in our understandings, both internally and in the world around us. Listen, we live in edgy, tumultuous times, and people are complex. The more we recognize our own edges, those places where we either or, and get real about them, the more we can help others to do the same. And that, I fully believe, can help to change the world. So thanks again for tuning in. And without further ado, it is time to introduce our guest this week. Annemarie Shrouder has spent more than 20 years in the field of diversity and inclusion as a facilitator, consultant, and international speaker, and is the best-selling author of Being Brown in a Black and White World, Conversations for Leaders on Race, Racism, and Belonging. A diversity and inclusion expert with a master's in bias awareness, Annemarie inspires awareness in connection, whether she is presenting to an audience, leading a workshop, consulting with a client, or writing. She creates opportunities for people to see more of each other, themselves, and the world around them. In doing so, she facilitates an opening to create spaces where people feel a sense of belonging and connection, where they can learn together and be all of who they are. These spaces are the spaces where real change can happen for people, organizations, and communities. Annemarie assists in the creation of healthy workplace communities through her signature methodology and inclusive leadership program. Organizations turn to Annmarie when they are looking to build environments where people can learn and are supported, and where they are acknowledged and valued. And she also delivers presentations and can be found and can be booked for speaking engagements that inspire people to see more and raise awareness about the importance of inclusion. For more information, please visit Annmarie at AnnmarieShrouder.com. Hello and welcome, Annmarie Shrouder.
Hello, Sandra. Thanks for having me.
Thanks
so
for
exciting.
coming on. It's always such a pleasure to read these incredible bios, and yours just your bio, your book, your work is such an inspiration. I was deeply moved by reading your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, a pleasure. And we're going to dive into that in a little bit. But as I like to do, I like to share with my listeners how my guests come to me. And you come to me through 3 different people.
Ooh, 3.
Well, you came to me first through my friend Leslie Michaels, who had you as a guest on her podcast. And I recently had another woman that Leslie introduced and me to. And it's such a pleasure to be able to share these incredible people doing incredible work with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But Leslie Michaels, who has, shout out to Leslie, has a podcast that Annmarie was on, Women We Should Know. But also, Tara Lynn Curry.
I do. Curry Avery, yes.
Who is a host here on Talk Radio. Please check out her podcast, Dismantling Racism.
Mm-hmm.
And you are also friends with Sam Leibowitz, who runs Talk Radio, which I did not know, but I had to speak with Sam today. So shout out to Sam, who has the Conscience Consultant, also on TalkRadio.NYC. So we're plugging everybody.
Excellent.
Yes, indeed. It's about uplifting everyone. So today, folks listening in here in the United States, Annmarie is tuning in from where?
Barbados.
The lovely Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and where it's nice as the wind blows here. I'm a little jealous. But
warm ocean breezes.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Rub it in. That's right.
No, just beautiful. Sending them your way.
You're sending me warmth. You're sending me warmth. Actually, I do like the cold. I'm one of the strange people that does like the cold. I don't like it all the time, but I do like the seasons. But anyway, here in the United States, it's MLK Day. How fitting to be talking about this work on this day, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Day. Today, we celebrate his work, his legacy, his mission, his vision. And I love that you have it in your book, a quote of his that a lot of people throw around at this time. A lot of people who don't want to focus in on race throw this quote around.
Yeah.
An MLK quote, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," said in 1963. And 60 years later, I was born then, 60 years later, here we are.
I wonder what he would say about today.
Yeah. I mean, the spiritual side of me, the eternal optimist, well, that's not even, those two don't even have to go hand in hand. I know that strides have been made, but I also know that they haven't.
Yeah.
So anyway, you said in your book after that quote, which I love, because we're going to get into the colorblindness, MLK didn't have a dream that suggested we not see color in order to see the content of character and the colorblindness. And so I loved the foreword of your book from your friend and colleague, Candy Barone. Am I pronouncing her name correctly? And
Yes.
that you were attending a workshop or a presentation of hers, and she said the words, "I don't see color,"
Yeah.
which I have people in my life to this day that still say that.
Oh, and so do I. My mother being one.
Right. Well, you've got this incredible poetry, folks. She has her own poetry in this book as well. And this is, she said, Mom said, this is her poem. "I don't see your color, you said. I love you, as if these can't coexist, being and loving. And I wonder how you can love me if you don't see my brown skin." Beautiful. I mean, like,
Thank
bam.
you.
How do you respond to people in your work, in your daily life, your friends, your clients? "I don't see color."
Yeah. Well, thanks for reading the poem. First of all, it's interesting to hear it from somebody else's mouth, right?
Yeah.
How
Tell me
do
to
I
read another
respond?
one.
You know, I know, or I think I know, or I choose to know that when people say I don't see color, um, they mean that they value me, and they honor who I am, and uh, they're not seeing me like some people in the world might see me, as being taken down a notch because of my skin color. I get that, like
Of
logistically.
course. It's well meant.
Right. And so I approach the comment with that kind of, grace. I think we all need grace.
Amen.
Um,
Oof.
yeah. And I like to talk about it because I'm brown.
Right.
This is my skin color. It is an integral and important part of who I am. It has shaped my experiences. It shapes how I see the world. It shapes how I move through the world, or don't in all situations. And so what I hope that people take away from a conversation with me about this, short or long, is that you have to see my color
Yeah.
to really see me. The challenge becomes what we do with the seeing of it. That's where the problem lies. So I like to talk about how kids are always fabulous at noticing the obvious,
Yes.
right? People with disabilities, people's different skin colors, their height, their size, and it'll pop right out of their mouth. And then we as adults freak out because, the kid has said, and we want to, push them out of the room and get out of there. It's not the noticing that's the problem. It's the judgment we make based on what we see. That's the problem.
Yeah. And for the people, who continue to struggle with it, that want to defend that, it does come from an acknowledging that it comes from a good place. And I'm speaking of some good friends of mine that defend it. The implication that it implies that because you don't see the skin, that there's the problem with the skin.
Yeah.
I mean, once you just like you just make that as a white person, duh, of course.
Yeah.
That they wouldn't be saying that about a person of white skin. So
it's amazing the lengths we go to not see difference, when difference is what makes us who we are.
And the power of diversity, and that's what the name of the show came out of, a scientific term about the power of diversity. But we talk about tribes and how they feel safe with sameness.
Yes.
But we've got to go to break, and that's a good spot to go. We don't need to unpack the psychological reasons why people like sameness, because we have glorious things to talk about in your book and in your work. So folks, stay tuned. When we come back with Annmarie, we are going to talk about her wonderful either or versus both and. We're going to dive into all tendrils of that work when we come back with Annmarie Shrouder on The Edge of Everyday. Stay tuned.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TalkRadio.NYC. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we are back with our wonderful guest, Annemarie Shrouder. So Annemarie, the linchpin of your work, either or versus both and.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what that is. How did you come to that understanding? How did that show up in your life? How is that the linchpin, the crux of all of your work?
Mm-hmm.
There's a big question for you.
That's a big question. So, and it continues to unfold. It continues to be something that I work on, notice, focus on. But so I'm biracial. Spoiler alert for those of you who want to read the book. I'm biracial. My dad's Black, my mom's white, and I have spent most of my life ping-ponging back and forth between the two. Right? Not Black enough for the Black kids, not white. Where do I fit? Where do I belong? How do I fit? And years ago, how many years ago now? 3, 4, 5, I can't remember. Some in my late 40s, a few years ago, I was at a retreat in Winnipeg run by a friend and colleague of mine, Joseph Rancis. We were talking about our work and what we do. And it occurred to me through poetry, and that's why it's in the book, because that's how my heart, right? Things like, hello,
Yes.
That's how I learn. That's how things drop in. That's how I'm sort of led to realizations and healing, really.
Yeah.
So I had started writing poetry again that particular weekend, and I shared some of that in the session that we did, me and 3 white guys. And I was like, I don't know if I want to share this poem, but they're amazing human beings. And, and I looked around the room, everybody was sort of teary afterward. I was like, oh my goodness, they get it. It was about race and my skin color, but they totally got it. I realized on that weekend, thanks to being able to share the poem and talk about it and talk about the parts of my life that had inspired that having to choose, first of all, we know the world is very polarized in so many issues. Yeah. You have to be here or there. And then we want to fight about it and somebody wants to be right. And we know what happens after that. What suddenly came to me was, oh my gosh, like I'm not Black or white. I am Black and white, and therefore me. And so both of those things are true.
Yes.
And I am an individual human being. that comes to the world with all these experiences. And so what I do now is I hold that space for people, because yes, whether we're talking about black and white or any other, two sides, quote unquote, we each have work to do in our respective areas, right? And we come together and we really listen, and we share, and we hear, and we learn from each other, and with each other, we can move forward in a different way. And that's what I'm endeavoring to do in my work.
It is so powerful. And it's so the edge of every day. I mean, that's really the one of the core tenets of the principle upon which I founded the original show, The Edge of Every Day, that morphed into this podcast, this understanding of the complexities that each human being walks with, and each country and each government and each organization, these complexities, and the willingness, if we can hold the tension of all of that, the profound, what can emerge, like Jung says, that can encompass all of that and create something new.
Yeah.
That not only solves that and holds that in wholeness, but also create something new. The safety and of either or. I mean, we just see it playing out in all the governments. And how do you work with, when you work with a single client? Do you work with single clients?
Like individuals?
Yeah. Or are you primarily somebody that works in workshops?
Yeah, I'm primarily I'm the guy who comes in and sort of opens everything. There's my
You're the can opener.
I'm the can opener.
Oh my God, yes. That's what she calls herself, the can opener. I love that.
Myself. Yeah, that's my sweet spot. So I love coming into an organization and shining a light on the things that we haven't thought about before, the things that we didn't know about before, and watching people go, oh, and then that's the beginning, a beautiful beginning of what comes next: conversation, dialogue, inquiry, learning, change.
Right.
That's my spot.
Yeah. And shining the light into the shadowy corners, into the shadowy places where people are resistant. Do you, when you work in these groups, I mean, how do you create these safe spaces? I mean, listeners, you read this book and you read what people are saying about her. This woman is like the diversity inclusion whisperer. How do you set up these? Oh, and before I go on to that, I really want to make sure that before you talk about how you create these safe spaces, I have heard recently a phrase that I want to acknowledge, because I think people need to hear this. People who are not getting exposed to these kinds of gatherings and workshops and presentations. People are just, really finally, since George Floyd's murder, are finally, the light bulb is going off and wanting to dive into this work. But the phrase inclusion doesn't necessarily, doesn't always lead to, inclusion leads to diversity. But diversity doesn't always lead to inclusion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, and that's in my learnings, I get it. Speak to us about what that means.
Yeah, I'd love to. So diversity is a fact, right? It's just about difference. And inclusion is a feeling. It's the quality of our experience. And if you think about feeling included, it's a yummy feeling. It could, we feel valued, we feel acknowledged, we feel like we belong, we feel loved, all those yummy, yummy things. the challenge is that the D and the I are stuck together, and now we've added the E. I mean, it's not new, but it's now we see it more and
More often, yeah.
which I'm really happy about. But they're stuck
For
together.
our listeners.
Equity. Yes. Yeah. And I like to stick a B on the end. So EDIB, B for belonging. But, you know, then we'll end up with a huge acronym that nobody will know all the words to. But the D and the I are you know, they come together in this way. And then we get confused. We think if we increase diversity, which is who is there, you know, visible or invisible diversity, because we can't see all types of diversity, but by increasing the diversity, we think that we've, you know, Shazam, and now we have inclusion. We've done it. Woo! And we go off on our merry way. And diversity is the low-hanging fruit, because especially if you can see it, you can check it off, right? Check. Did it. Look, we look better now. We look different now. There's more diversity here. Yay, celebration. What we miss in that is the inclusion piece, the feeling, the experiences that people are having in our space. And when we don't go further than diversity, what often happens is that the people who we have welcomed into our space don't feel included, don't feel like they can be forthcoming with their ideas or perspectives, don't feel like their ideas are welcome, don't feel like people want to know what they have to say or how their experiences are different, or they might hear it, but they don't do anything with it. And so inclusion is what we are building together. And I believe it's something that we create together over time. Inclusion doesn't happen like that. We don't do inclusion, we create inclusion. And so as we create spaces where people feel all those yummy things, you know, valued and acknowledged and cared for, all those things, when we build those spaces, by raising our awareness, by building community, by using what we learn about each other to create a sense of belonging, the diversity will come because people feel good there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's circular.
Yeah. But we have to start with, in my opinion, we need to start with the inclusion first. People don't like that because you can't tell that they're doing it.
Too.
You can't see it, right? You can feel it if you take the time. And yes, it's hard work.
It's hard work, and it takes courageous conversations and being triggered and stepping out of your comfort zone and being willing to being challenged to really hear someone's truth.
Yeah.
And the payoffs for organizations
are huge.
Absolutely.
Huge.
On how many, very huge through, a happy staff or happy environment, and with what they're putting out in the world and what profits they're seeing. I would think it just would go through the roof.
Yeah, there's so many ripple effects that come from somebody feeling good at work and like they matter.
I mean, like a no-brainer.
So many. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, and they're yeah, and it's far-reaching ripple effects, right? Yeah.
So, okay, we have 2 minutes to break. So I am wondering if I think we have enough time for this.
Okay.
And we can continue afterwards, but how do you create these spaces? Paint us a picture of how you move into that, if you can. Okay.
Yeah. Well, 1 minute. The secret sauce. Carefully. Done. Drop the mic. Boom. That's it.
Yes, that was perfect. How do you do it? Paint that picture carefully. Oh, I love it. Yeah. I mean, for all of the things we just said, all of, everyone, well, and speaking as people are just afraid to do this. And that's what I want to start with when we come back. After the break, we're going to talk about the vulnerability piece in these safe spaces and the vulnerability piece in Annemarie's incredible book when we come back on The Edge of Everyday. Stay tuned.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.NYC. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on TalkRadio.NYC.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauber, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on TalkRadio.NYC.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.NYC, I host a program, Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains, but it pours
On the edge of every day. And we are back with Annemarie Shrouder, about to dive in talking about vulnerability and setting up these safe spaces for people to learn about inclusion and diversity and belonging. And so my question was, and you so gloriously answered carefully, what was, how do you set these spaces to paint the picture of how you create, if you will, these conversations?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was serious with the carefully because
Of course.
it's a navigation, right?
Yeah.
And it's different every time because the groups are different every time. The people in those groups are different. So I want to come in with compassion.
Yeah.
You know, we're at different parts of our journey. For some people, this is the first time they've had a conversation about inclusion or diversity or race or whatever we happen to be talking about, whether it's a narrow aspect of a diversity or a broad aspect of diversity. So we want to have some compassion for folks who are feeling like, oh my gosh, and the other folks are like, oh, again, you know, like,
Right.
why are we still talking about this? And everything in between. Yeah. And I feel like we create those spaces gently and slowly, and we just, you know, one conversation at a time. And I like the word safer because we can never 100% guarantee safety,
no such
right?
thing. Right. When your version of safety is perhaps not mine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, we are bound to make mistakes. And here's the thing, for me, safety isn't about never make a mistake. Safety is about, how do I hold you when the mistake happens, right? How do I stay with you when the mistake happens?
Yes.
You know, how do I show up? And then that talks to your vulnerability, right? That talks to, you know, what am I willing to share and let you in so that you can see a little bit more about who I am and where I'm coming from. And what are you willing to do on your end so that I can see a little bit more, you know, acknowledge a little bit more about who you are. And sometimes spaces are super safe because we're sort of skimming the surface, and then we drop a little bit deeper, and then it gets a little, you know, it can get a little bit like, oh,
yeah, people get triggered and defensive and
yeah, afraid,
all of those rough edges that we talk about.
Yeah, and we respond very differently to those things depending on our past experiences and who we are in the world, right? So it's a dance.
Yeah,
really, it's a dance.
Yeah, you know, it makes me think about asking you, well, I'll get to that later, asking you about, you know, your some of your, no, I'll ask you it now.
Ask me now. Yeah.
The thing that you love most about this work, and what's for you personally, and what's what has been the really rough edge of this work? I mean, it doesn't take a jump to imagine that for you, but I don't want to assume that you might just shock me with some of the things that fill your heart and make you sad.
Yeah. The things that fill my heart are those moments when I can feel people opening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
Something's landing. They're having a moment. They're realizing something new, something that somebody in their group has said has touched them. I love those. Those are amazing moments.
Yeah.
And some of the edgy moments are, when people can't meet each other, when they're just so in their version of whatever we're talking about that they cannot, even if they're trying, they cannot get out of that and meet us halfway, right? Meet the other person halfway. Yeah.
An example of that you feel comfortable sharing?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I love this story because it's just so ridiculous that I can't even believe that it happened to me. But I was doing a session years ago, and somebody just couldn't wrap their head around gender identity. Could not do it. And it was a small piece of it wasn't a workshop on gender or a presentation on gender identity, but we were talking about diversity and inclusion and why it's important.
Right.
And this gentleman said to me, what if I want you to call me Your Majesty? And I was like, what? And I just speechless. I did not know what to say. What if I want to be a horse?
Wow.
And I we engaged. I was talking to him about, how people feel and what the space that we create to allow them to feel like they're acknowledged, that they're important. And it wasn't landing for him. And it was his colleagues that said, hey, remember why we started this company? Because there were some people that didn't want to work with us. Like, what are you doing? And in the end, we had to agree to disagree because the whole conversation would have focused on this, yeah. But he couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Bless his heart. He could not get it that day. Maybe the next day.
Or would not.
Right?
More to the point. I don't think it's, just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean you can't grasp it. Or just because it's sort of confusing doesn't mean you can't grasp it. But
yeah, I really think, Sandra, that sometimes we just cannot. There's something that stops us from being that open on that particular day, that we can hear something different.
That's true. I would agree with that. I don't want to endow people with skills at the moment that they don't have. But yes, I would agree with you.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. But the vulnerability piece also that I want to weave into this is the vulnerability that you had in your own book. And I just was like, damn, yeah, if I ask people to be vulnerable, then I'm just going to do it in my book. And it was beautiful, Annemarie.
Thank you.
So for folks, this is not a spoiler. It jumps right out right at the beginning. It's this glorious weaving, a hybrid weaving of teachings about D&I and race versus racism, and which we'll touch on, and all of the work that she does with her own personal stories on her growth through either or, being biracial and multicultural, and her heartfelt stories and her poetry. Gorgeous. And it just flows so beautifully. And my husband, who read the book and loved it and is going to pass it along into his agencies, he wanted to know if some of your text inspired some of the poetry, or some of the poetry inspired some of the text, and the creative process of that choice of of weaving that in? Was it a creative choice, or was it, as you said, completely about your heart?
Yeah.
Maybe a little both.
Maybe, well, definitely about my heart. Poetry is how my heart speaks, and they're succinct. And I feel, for me, they're to the point.
Yeah.
No fluff. Like, that's what it is. And so I didn't want to get lost in the flowery, writing about something to the point where you lose the point. The poems had been written already, many of them years before. And I really toyed with, should I just write a book of poetry and leave them by themselves, and then do this businessy book, by itself? And I sometimes still wonder about that. Did I do the right thing? But in the end,
it's a perfect example of both and.
Exactly.
It's the edge of every day.
Exactly. So in the end, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, in the end, I wanted it to be a meaningful book. And if you don't like poetry or you don't want to read them, don't read them. But for me, it allowed me to really say what I wanted to say. And then the stories, the personal stories that I wrote around those gave context.
Yeah.
Right.
And it really moved the poetry. Sometimes it doesn't always, that when people include things like that in their books, it doesn't necessarily always move the story, if you will, forward. And in every instance, your poetry did. And I couldn't wait to read it when I got to it, as opposed to sometimes I'll admit I want to skip over the poetry and keep reading and then come back to the poetry. Yours was absolutely beautiful. So we have enough time. Race versus racism. Go. I won't. I'll let you say it.
Well, race, as many of us now know more than we did.
And those of you who have not heard this.
Yeah. Hang on to your seat, everyone.
Yeah.
Somebody made it up.
Complete construct.
Yeah. So so because somebody made it up, it's not a real thing. And many of us have been taught that it is, in various ways by various people. Well, I think lately, I would like to think that some people haven't been lately.
Well, that's
but
true.
Very lately, very lately.
Okay. And those people are going to grow up and run the world.
Right. Like my child, for example, right? She's 10 and we talk about it. So she's not growing up with the idea that there are different races of people. She's growing up with the idea that there's human beings with, in this case, different skin colors. Hooray. Right. But because of that construct, created with, and the ripple effects of that construct, we have racism.
Yeah.
Because what that construct did was then categorize people by skin tone and give some people more value, lighter skin, and some people less value, darker skin. And Shazam, racism was born. And so as much as race is a construct, racism is very real and impacts us all, impacts all of us. Every single one of us, right? White people, Black people, and every color in between, just it impacts us differently. Some people are impacted in a positive way because of racism, and some people are impacted in a negative way because of racism, because of the amount of melanin we have or don't have in our skin, and what we make that mean by virtue of this social construct created a few hundred years ago.
And the soul crushing lie of it that the certain color is at the top of this value list.
Right.
And what you have to soul crush to maintain that myth.
Absolutely.
So I came across this quote on a website. It's also the name of a how do you say in your country? Documentary. Thank you. There's the word. Deconstructing Karen is the name of it. Brilliant. Deconstructing Karen. And this is from their Instagram page. And it said the cost of white privilege and white supremacy for white people. is nothing short of trading humanity for the illusion of comfort.
Ooh.
So
Love it.
spot on, just so spot on.
Love it.
And yeah, so that's a resource, everyone. You can watch that documentary, I believe, on Hulu. And I think that if you go to Deconstructing Karen on Instagram, there is going to be a group that's going to show it in the fall for free. But you're going to watch it together and discuss it in this group. And, again, just continue for white people in particular to understand where their bias is, to understand where their blinders are, to understand the work that we need to do to move this conversation and this work and this dismantling of racism forward. With that said, we have to go to a break. When we come back, what are we going to talk about? We're going to hear about what's your leading edge, what's next for you, how people can find you, and all that good stuff. When we come back with Annemarie Shrouder on the Edge of Everyday. Stay tuned.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.NYC, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.NYC.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on TalkRadio.NYC, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on TalkRadio.NYC.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains, but it pours
on the edge of every day. And we're back with Annemarie Shrouder. What is your part in creating a world where all people feel a sense of belonging? Well, and I love that question in the top of her book. I have a quote here that I want to read. It's by Neil Gaiman, and it is really relevant. I mean, it's relevant for the new year, and we're still wishing people Happy New Year and thinking of our intentions. But I think that it's really apropos for the work that you do, Annemarie, and I know you're going to love this. I hope that in this year to come, you make mistakes. Because if you are making mistakes, then you are making new things, trying new things, learning, living, pushing yourself, changing the world. You're doing things you've never done before, and more importantly, you're doing something. So that's my wish for you and all of us, and my wish for myself. Make new mistakes, make glorious, amazing mistakes. Make mistakes nobody's ever made before. Don't freeze, don't stop. Don't worry that it isn't good enough or it isn't perfect, whatever it is. Art or love or work or family or life or diversity or inclusion. Whatever it is you're scared of doing, do it. Make your mistakes next year and forever.
Love it.
Yeah, pretty powerful.
Yeah, very.
Well,
Very,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say people worry about making mistakes all the time in this work, right?
Yeah.
What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? That's life, folks.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what I always tell people that I'm working with is it's not just about the mistake, it's what we do after. It's what we do with it.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Right? It's how I connect with you and how I show up.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked about the clients and the workshops. Why did you write this book? For whom is this book for?
Well, I put leaders in the subtitle because I wanted leaders in particular to read it. I think when you work at an organization, if the leadership is open, if the leadership understands that this is something to lean into, then it's more likely to fly, more likely to become part of the DNA in an organization. And so from a client perspective, I really hope that leaders pick it up and sort of take a minute to do some self-reflection as they're reading it, right? And that's why there's the business piece in there, but there's also the personal piece again to give it context. But I really hope that everybody picks it up.
Of course.
Because we're all leaders in our lives in some way, shape, or form. We all have people
us are
that
responsible for dismantling racism.
And all of us are responsible. Yeah, all of us. And so, I said to you before, man, did I make a mistake? Should I have done the poetry book by itself to make it more accessible? Should I reprint it without the subtitle because maybe only leaders are picking it up? I don't know, but I think it'll find its way. I hope it'll find its way to the people that are ready to explore the role that race has played in their lives, whether they're white, Black, or, all of the glorious colors in between, quote unquote. I think it's a conversation we all need to have.
Well, and I think the whole understanding of leadership is shifting. I think, and that's why the poetry is so amazing. People are really, leaders now are embracing know thyself in a much deeper way. The old style, the either or style of leadership is over.
Yeah.
Is falling away and is being replaced by leaders who are embracing this and people who are, to your point, stepping into their leadership in a variety of ways. Me with a podcast, lots of different ways of leading.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what edge are you working on personally right now? Navigating right now?
So many edges. What I still grapple with is, am I Black enough? Still, even though I'm holding this space.
Of course you are. We do the work and we spiral.
We do the work.
Yeah.
And I, very recently had somebody say to me, how dare you do anti-Black racism work when you don't identify as Black? And it just really took my breath away for more than a moment. I was just like, so my edge is reminding myself of my worth as a human being who has a very particular experience in this body this time. Right. And the work that I can do from this place and in this place and how I, who I can touch through this work. And it's not going to be everybody, right? Because we're going to resonate or not resonate.
Right.
And for sure, I'm not going to have the same experience as somebody who is Black. for sure. And the experiences that I have in many cases allow for a conversation that I am grateful to be able to have with people about race.
Yeah. Very powerful. You embody the edge of every day, and both and. You are your walking teachings. It's exquisite, absolutely exquisite. So we can find you, Annmarie Shrouder, at AnnmarieShrouder.com.
Yes, very creative.
And all of, and I love your website, all of your wonderful team is there, and
most of them, not all of them, most of them. Some have chosen not to have a picture up there, but most of them.
Well, I just loved your website.
Thank you.
And your book, you can find there. Oh wait, no, you have a separate website for your book, right?
You can get it through AnnmarieShrouder.com.
Okay.
There's a link there. Yeah.
Okay. And if you are in need of hiring Annmarie for speaking or for either one of her incredible courses, you can do that as well. You can read about that on her website as well. Annmarie, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your warmth and your vulnerability and your creativity and mentoring all of us through this conversation.
Thank you, Sandra, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And before I thank all of you out there for listening, I would like you, Annmarie, is there anything you want to close with our listeners?
I would just encourage everybody to pause. Just to pause. Hear again, listen more. Just pause.
I love that. Power of the pause, of silence, and of deep listening, deep active listening. Amen. Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for spending this time with us. Remember, you are always at the edge of the miraculous. See you next week.
This is our last dance. This is ourselves under pressure. Under pressure. Under pressure.